Michelle, I'm ready. Hello, everyone. Welcome on in. If you're with us today, it means that you have not been raptured. I am really excited to invite you to be in community today as we have this conversation. I'm welcoming you to Black Feminist Future's third quarter Hone. Hone is Black Feminist Future's political education series, where we are taking the business serious of sharpening in these times. My name is Paris Hatcher. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the founder and executive director of Black Feminist Future. And, the times that we're in, I don't have to tell y'all, from your own lives, groceries are just getting higher. Information is just getting more distorted. It's wild out here. And the way that we will be prepared for these times is if we continue to sharpen ourselves so that we can have a clear analysis of what's happening, so that we can prepare ourselves and our people. And that's exactly what Hone is about. There's a constant state of attack and an information overload. And Hone exists to be a space of exploration, to develop and deepen our minds so that we can have critical minds to shape our critical action. And it's open to everyone who is curious and wants to know more about what Black feminist praxis is, not just in thinking or theory, but also how do we apply it. Each Hone, we bring you some of the best Black feminist thinkers and doers to be in conversation with me. And I have some pings going off. I'm like, okay, always a sauna. If y'all have a sauna, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to pause those. We bring some of the best Black feminist thinkers and minds to be in conversation around issues that really matter the most to Black women, girls, and gender expansive people, and basically people who are oppressed or concerned about what we're facing at this time. Also, along with the conversation that I'm going to be having today, the people that we're going to be in conversation with, our speakers, will be providing accompanying resources that are going to be curated to help support your further political education and development. So let's get started with this conversation, y'all. I first wanted to call this, do you know we only have 30 minutes? Because that is literally what it feels like. It feels like we are living in a New York meme, right? Do you know that the time is winding? Almost every day you turn on the news and there's another indicator that there is something happening, that we are really rapidly heading in a direction that is not for the best for us as a people, for the planet. Many people are calling this time, and I'm in alignment with this, that we are in an interregnum, the dangerous in between where old systems collapse and what comes next is still to be undecided. In this gap, fascism pushes hardest to take root. That's what we're seeing right now. That's my assessment. And that's some of the questioning that we're going to be talking to with our incredible speakers tonight. It exploits the cracks in our democracy, it erodes checks and balances, and it deepens the crisis of legitimacy, all while offering false promises of stability in exchange for our freedoms. But Black feminists know the script, and we are going to be the ones that will be leading the resistance. Today, I'll be in conversation with two of my favorite movement leaders, Barbara Ransby and M. Adams, to really be thinking about this moment and the collective tools we must sharpen to defeat fascism and claim the liberated future that is our birthright. So I'm going to introduce our incredible speakers. And I really want to think of y'all as conversants, really, because this is a conversation. To tee us up, we have the Barbara Ransby, a professor, a writer, scholar, activist. She really is one of my favorite thinkers and always has such a unique perspective. She's not new to this, she's true to this, decades of organizing, and has also written some of the most important books around Black feminist leaders and around Black feminist movements. So thank you so much, Barbara Ransby, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, forever activists, always thinking about how we just, and I'm so pleased that you're with us tonight. So thank you, Barbara. We're also joined by M. Adams. M. Adams is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You always like to shout that out. You are a gender non-conforming person who is an organizer, a feminist. As a survivor, you really think about what the tools your community needs to survive. You serve in many, many spaces. You are executive at InfraBL. You are on various boards, and really take the work of movement scientists. You've introduced that to us, and really are serious around how we can think scientifically as activists, as movement people in these times. So welcome both Barbara and M. I'd love for y'all to just, before we dive in, if y'all could welcome our community that we're with tonight. We have over 400 folks who registered to be in conversation. And, share your name. We did your name, but anything you want us to know, your pronoun, and something that, who you're with, who are the groups and organizations I did not lift up that you would want us to know about? Barbara, you want to kick us off?
I can kick you off, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I was looking forward to this conversation, although I'm very tired. We're all tired. I'm tired on so many levels, but I was looking forward to this conversation because I love you and M, and I always learn something in these spaces. So I'm happy to be here. I'm in Chicago. My pronouns are she and her. I like the way you said that I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. That's another way of saying. Been around the block a couple times, sister. So I have groups, that I identify with for a long time, and then the newer groups. I'm a member of InfraBL and work on one of the tables at InfraBL, and also Rising Majority. I'm on the leadership team there, and Scholars for Social Justice. Those are my three active political homes, if you will, at the moment. But I'm also, in this moment, really trying to be, as I described Ella Baker once, as politically promiscuous. And I obviously use that playfully. But, we need to be talking to people we're not always talking to. We need to be forging as much unity as we can, but it has to be principled unity to forge some kind of united front in this increasingly fascist and authoritarian moment. And I'm trying to find a little bit of joy in this dire and dangerous time. So that's where my head's at. A lot's going on here in Chicago. Of course, a lot's going on all over the world. I think we have to keep our eyes open and our hearts open too, in terms of optimism of what we can accomplish. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be in this conversation.
Thank you, Barbara, so much. How about you, Em? Anything you'd like to welcome this community with?
Hey, first of all, I want to say shout out to the Virgos. It's Virgo season. I just had a birthday. Me and Beyonce. That's a way to get the juice going.
And I often think of the two of you in the same thought.
I'm so happy to hear that. But I think two organizations I want to lift up. One, the Movement for Black Lives that you mentioned, where I've gotten a chance to be with the Movement for Black Lives in many different roles over the years, but it's made up of just these incredible organizations across the United States who are all trying to figure out how to advance Black queer feminist vision, an abolitionist vision, and an anti-capitalist vision. So really honored to be a part of that space, which constantly challenges and sharpens me, and I get to add my piece to the fabric, if you will, of the Black freedom struggle in this current iteration. And then I also want to lift up Freedom Inc. So I lived in Wisconsin, born and raised. And I lived in Wisconsin for most of my life. And I got a chance to be a part of a political project there called Freedom Inc. that focuses on survivors of sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And those same survivors, we organized around structural violence to create the future that we wanted. And I want to lift up that work because what brings many of us to your impressive leadership and work pairs, Black Feminist Future, is our own lived experiences. And sometimes it's hard to put together the urgency, the immediacy of our own lives and our own homes, bodies, relationships, et cetera, with the demands of fighting the broader structural thing. And so I hope to be in conversation with folks around how to do that or how to struggle through that together.
Thank you, Em, for that. And I too am a Virgo, and this is the last day of our season. So shout out to us and the ushering in of fall. And when we're talking about the ushering in, let me get our first question started. So a part of this conversation was really seated with me at M4BL at 10. So M4BL just celebrated 10 years of doing really hard work of bringing in all these organizations and really, charting out what it means to really build Black power, liberatory power, left power. And, before then, there were this buzzword, interregnum, just everywhere, kind of flying around. And I really appreciated it as a way to understand this term at this moment. And I would love if both of you could take some time to just share your own understanding and framing of the word interregnum. Do you believe it's the correct word for what we're calling this moment? So, Em, I'm going to have you get started, and Barbara, if you could follow up.
Yeah.
Cool. So the word interregnum was originally developed or taken from, or attributed to rather, someone named Gramsci, who in our current lingo we would say was a political scientist, a thinker, a freedom fighter, and had been involved in struggles. And the use of this term, and I could go down sort of a rabbit hole about him, so I'll try to pivot away from that, but I wanted to say where it was attributed. But the use of that term came from when he was describing sort of what was happening in his political condition, where there was a dying out of the old regime. So what he was putting out there as provoking is that the way things used to be organized, the dominant ways that society was constructed was fundamentally being rearranged or fundamentally being challenged. But what it'll be next is not yet fully formed or not yet fully determined. That's sort of the crux of the idea of an interregnum, is that the old thing is dying and the new thing is being born. But and he also said another thing important about that is that then at that time was the time of monsters. So the relevance or the usefulness I think that term offers us is a way to look at, is society going to be the way that it always was? Is this administration different or significantly different in such a way that we have to approach it differently, fight it differently, understand it differently? And what is coming next, assuming that the next thing is not the same old thing. And so to me, I think it's really helpful for Black people to have that understanding in this time, because we're used to crises. We're used to getting screwed over. We're used to getting the short end of the stick. We're used to getting blamed, incarcerated, deported, detained, toxics dumped in our water, denied access to housing, and a set of other things. And so because we have that experience, it may be easy for us right now to be like, told you so. I voted. You should have voted. Should have listened to me. I'm part of the 92%. Y'all should have listened to me. I'm going to sit this one out. It's in some ways easy to have that tendency because we are so used to being beat down. But the application of the concept of interregnum challenges that posture. It says this is not business as usual. This is not your average crisis. This is not your average crises. And in fact, this is what many of us would call a systemic crisis, where the fundamental aspects of society are being rearranged. And what comes next still needs to be determined. And I also think that that particular perspective is important around the interregnum concept, because if you look at, if you open that New York Times app every day or however, wherever you get your news, every minute, every hour is another grim thing done by this administration. And that could lead you into pessimism politically and depression personally. But it's important to know that they haven't fully won yet. They have not fully consolidated and shaped the new society. And that tells me, as a scientist, that there's still some opening, that there's still a crack, there's still a fissure, there's still room for us actually to determine what comes next. So I think the concept is very effective, or rather, a very good description of the current context that we're in. And I would give it to Barbara to see what else she has to add.
Yeah. No, I thought that was one of the thank you for the question. And I think, sometimes we have terms like this and people get impatient with it. And I think the term interregnum is an opening for a conversation. And I thought it was one of the more robust conversations at Infrabiel's St. Louis gathering. So do I think it's a correct term? I think it's a useful term for all the reasons that Em said. I think it jolts us to see this as a significant rupture. I mean, the other thing, our people say we know crises and all this, but also a whole range of folks on the left say, capitalism has cyclical crises. That's built into the thing. Is this something more fundamental than that? And I think it is something more fundamental than that. So it signals rupture, it signals break, it signals, hey, pay the hell attention, to what's happening, that there's a crisis. And as Chinua Achebe used to, said in the book title, things are falling apart. Here's what I would say as two things about interregnum that put some limits on it, because it is a word, it is a useful word, it's an important word for all these reasons, but it's not the only word that could describe this moment. And I'm a historian, so everything is about context. Like, when did that happen? So interregnum's talked about, I learned it through Gramsci, right? Gramsci, who was also a political prisoner, died in prison. And so I learned, or soon after he was out, I don't remember which, he went in and out a couple of times. But in the prison notebooks is where he talks about this period of interregnum, and into this chaos comes the monsters. But also historians refer to interregnums in other periods. 17th century, there was a kind of interregnum as society moved from feudalism to capitalism and new regimes were set up. The two reasons I would say we just need to think, in a nuanced way, which of course Em always does, about interregnum is context. So what is the context in which the interregnum is happening? We don't yet have a systems change. In other words, we're not necessarily changing from capitalism to something else. Fascism is a governing system. It's a governing regime. Bourgeois democracy is a governing regime for a capitalist economy. So we could have a fascist regime, still have racial capitalism, as an underlying system and ideology, right? So I would say, let's look at the context and see where it's going. Now, I think things could evolve. I feel every morning like we're living in a time of monsters, because these people are out of their minds. And the level of, I'm not a religious person, but just the level of lack of humanity and lack of morality and lack of any remote sense of integrity. What else could you say except this is monstrous behavior? The bad news is it could get worse. So I want us to also have a tiered notion of interregnum. That is, the ruling class is at war with itself too. There are different sectors of the ruling class that are arguing over which regime of power should govern in this crisis. And I know you talked about crisis in I think is a great way. And I'm trying to write something about it in a similar way, and I'll say something about that later. But they are in conflict about how to resolve this crisis, right? And but they still have firm control over state power. They are trying to turn it to, again, a different governing regime, but it's not like fascism versus capitalism. Is bourgeois democracy in capitalism, or is fascist rule in capitalism? Capitalists made a lot of money under the Nazis. Capitalists made a lot of money under Franco. They made a lot of money under Mussolini. They made a lot of money under Bolsonaro in Brazil. So I just want us to just be making those kind of nuanced distinctions. But, rupture, yes. Break, yes. Chaos as a result of redefining things quickly, yes. Crisis, yes. Things falling apart, yes. But they have not fully lost power. And it is a particular sector that's trying to consolidate a particular mode of power and implementation of capitalist strategies. But it is not capitalist versus somebody else. But if we do our work in rapid, form, we could change that.
Yes, and I think that's what people are really
answers. Sorry.
No, Barbara. I think that was great. I think, and this is a learning space for a variety of people. And what I really love is that y'all said so many juicy things. I want to do a bit of a recap that what is next is not fully formed. And so, yes, it is easy. And I have myself been guilty of, oh my gosh, it's like, it's happening. We still have an opportunity. And we must do all we can in the opportunity that we have. That really, I really appreciate you saying, yes, especially as Black folks. It's like, yes, we've been here before. And I really hope our community here today is listening that, yes, but this is different. This is different. So it does not mean I'm just going to turn it off, shut it off. While you may want to limit your social media, this is going to require action from everyone. There's a role that everyone can play. I love that you said, Barbara, it's a useful term, but not the only word, and that we could have fascism and capitalism still together. So while we may be thinking about, some of us just on like the governing system, we also must be thinking about the financial system as well, right? And so we need to be really agile and really understanding what's at play. My next question for y'all goes back to the panel that we were on.
One more.
Yes, please.
Because I also, in this moment, and Em was saying, we read the paper and how we feel. I don't want to be falsely optimistic, but I also want to always say, the other thing I wanted to say about interregnum and the usefulness of interregnum is, and I think Em was, alluding to this too, is a sense of possibility, right? If things are going to change in a fundamental way, then some shit is up for grabs. So that is kind of, that is a hopeful thing. There's opportunities in crisis, right, that aren't there in other times. And in fact, we may feel like we're not as strong as we want to be right now, but it is in fact the strengths of our movements that precipitated this kind of fierce and ferocious and violent response. I mean, the fear of 20 million people in the street in 2020 was no small thing for a minority of billionaires who want to retain power in some kind of way. So there are strengths that we don't always fully claim or fully understand that we need to claim and can claim. And that is also what we need to look to in this moment. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yes, no, indeed. I think really being clear-eyed about what's ahead is really important, right? We're not gonna, we're not gonna claim any easy victories, as the quote says.
Yeah.
So, Em, you offered us at M4BL at 10 this framing, crisis of ecology, empire, and economy. And you were speaking to this in your remarks to the first question. I'd like y'all to expound on these multiple, compounding crises that we are facing. And with a narrow focus, not a narrow, let me not say that, it's never narrow, but with a particular focus on what these crises mean for Black women, girls, and gender expansive people. And will you kick us off? And maybe if you want to do some framing around crisis of economy, ecology, and empire. And for those who are joining us, we will be doing questions. You can add your questions in the StreamYard here for our Q&A in a bit. So please ask your questions. The chat is popping and is really lively. And so yes, I'd love for your framing. Help us think about that and your responses, in particular, the crises impact on Black women, girls, and gender expansive people.
Mm-hmm. So let's start by talking about crises. So one way to think about crises is to categorize them in terms of their scale and severity. So Barbara mentioned something called a cyclical crisis. This is the kind of crises that we experience every day, which is personally very detrimental and harmful to us, right? Capitalism has cyclical crises. It creates a crisis, and then it's like, oh, we need to make more money. And the way they make more money is further harm and violence to our bodies, our lives, and our communities, right? So an example would be the government is saying, we've got a national, we have a national debt. We're broke. The government's going broke. And we're going to make our money back by cutting housing, Section 8, food stamps, healthcare, all the things that they think the quote unquote welfare queen or the Black woman needs, right? They go about cutting that kind of thing. Businesses do it, or, direct capitalists do it also, right? Capitalists want to make more money. They do it by paying us less money, exploiting our labor here or in other parts of the world, exploiting the labor of Black people, Black and brown people. Capitalism needs more workers. It forces Black women to be chattel, right? Make babies, keep making babies, make the babies, as many babies as our workforce needs, how we need them. And we're not going to give you any support to raise them. We're going to leave the full cost and responsibility of that onto you and blame you for whatever we say is wrong with society. So those are examples of how we've been experiencing the cyclical crises of capitalism, right? As Black people, Black women, trans people, gender nonconforming people, youth, etc. Then there's something called a structural crisis, where something happens inside of capitalism and the capitalist system or the cause of the institution within capitalism that has caused the crisis can't resolve it itself. So an example of that is in 2008, 2009, where, if y'all remember, the banks were like, oops, we don't got no more money. Oops, we somehow lost trillions of dollars. Oops. And we can't fix it ourselves. We need an intervention from some other place. And so the government had to step in and bail out all the banks. So they call it like the bank bailouts. That's an example of a structural crisis where the banks couldn't fix it themselves with their same way of causing cyclical crises on us. They instead needed an intervention from some other place. And then there are systemic crises, which is where the system in and of itself is fundamentally questioned. And I think Barbara's provocation earlier was interesting. Do we think that the capitalist system on its face right now is being fundamentally questioned? And I think that it is being more questioned than it has been over the last sets of decades. And I do think if we do our job, it'll be fully called into question and put on the table. But so to your point about this crises now of ecology, empire, and economy, I would argue, and some people would argue, that each one of those areas, if it is not already facing a systemic crisis, is close to facing a systemic crisis. So capitalism has a mindless plan for growth. It wants to grow until it can't. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It wants to grow, 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 make more money, more money, more money. And that has put us in a state of facing ecological collapse. We are killing the coral reef. They won't stop fracking. They're killing life in the ocean. The hurricanes are worse than they've ever been. The tornadoes are worse than they've ever been. There are more frequent earthquakes. There's climate instability in various parts of the world, et cetera, right? So in terms of the ecology, capitalism has caused the ecology to hit pretty much a breaking point, to hit, it's gonna, if we don't stop this thing, there is, climate scientists and any scientist really within their right mind is saying, if we don't stop this thing, like today, actually years ago, we are facing ecological collapse. There will not be a planet Earth that would be able to inhabit human life because of the way that capitalists have ravaged the planet in capitalism. The other aspect of that analysis is crisis of empire. So we might not feel like it's our personal crisis because we may not be that invested in the project called the United States. But the crisis of the empire is really pointing to some major changes in geopolitics and world politics, right? So the question about who's the leading and dominant power, will that continue to be the US? What we need to concern ourselves with is not the question of patriotism when it comes to that. We need to concern ourselves with the question of war, right? We need to concern ourselves with the US steady trying to assert itself, steady trying to be the imperial power, and what is it willing to do to maintain that status. So threatening China with sanctions, some people have said, oh man, this could potentially lead to a third world, right? If the United States and China were to go into a hot war with one another, that's a worldwide calamity, right? The way that the United States is trying to play pawns out of particular countries to stretch its power, assert its power, or befriend other particular powers to keep its imperial status should absolutely be a concern to us, because all of that translates into war, genocide abroad. And if they're doing it abroad, they will definitely do it to us. And we know that as Black folks, and we need to be concerned with other Black people around the world, not just Black people that are on the land in the United States. And the last thing that I'll say is on the crisis of the economy. I do think there are some fundamental questions being asked in the economy. You know, we don't know what this administration is going to do or not do to the US dollar, its value, worth, and currency. We don't know what role cryptocurrencies, digital, I mean, I could again go down a rabbit hole on that, but the thing that I'm trying to emphasize is there are some questions around the way that capitalism is structured. Is it still going to exist in its current iteration the same way? Some people are theorizing that we will be in a techno-feudalist mode, which I can expand upon that later. But the thing to know about that is that the economy could be changed in a significant way that would not be the same organization of capitalism that we have now. And that doesn't mean better. I want to be really clear about that.
Right.
There'll still be exploitive, there'll still be owners, there'll still be poor and extremely poor people and genocide and a bunch of stuff. But we're saying those three things together, crisis of economy, empire, and ecology, have made it so that the everyday person, and here's the strongest, I think, application for us, is that the everyday person is saying something's not right and I don't want it anymore. And that's presented in a variety of ways. That's presented as people being like, I'm not going to participate in the electoral process. I don't care about you over there. I'm no longer going to be in solidarity. That could be folks joining far right and MAGA factions, right? Being like, I was rocking with y'all, but y'all ain't got it. They got it over here. So it expresses in a variety of ways in our communities. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. And Barbara, if you could expound in particular, I was really interested in around you. You called it, is it not tech feudalism? I always want to call it techno.
Feudalism is a theory of Yanis Varoufakis, the Greek guy who used to be the finance minister and was in the left party Syriza. And so he's written a book called Techno-Feud. Em and I can both say a lot about that. It's a provocative book. It's a useful concept. He really doesn't mean techno-feudalism. He means techno-capitalism. He just says that to get our attention. And if you talk to him long enough, he admits that. I mean, he's very smart and he's on our side, but you know how those egos go.
Yeah.
But, so I think that the title is born of that. But I want to follow up to what, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I want you to follow up.
Okay. I drink a lot of coffee in the day. So by this time I'm all excited, even though I look tired. Tired and excited. Yeah, I mean, as I was listening to Em, I think we're not so far off because this idea of crisis, Interregnum really speaks to almost a loss of power in the context of a crisis being resolved or exploded, right? You haven't consolidated a new form of power yet, but the system has broken down and is not functioning in a sense. And so that's what I'm arguing is not quite happened yet. But is capitalism in a crisis? Was it in a crisis before Trump? Is white nationalism and this fascist movement a response to the crisis? Absolutely. Is it a fundamental crisis? Absolutely. Now, you define it much more elegantly than I do as economy, empire, and ecology. What I've been talking about is basically financialization of capital, which has transformed the way that moneymakers make money. A large sector of the ruling class makes money, and I'll say more about that. Environment and climate, and technology. So financialization, is the increasing power of the banks as almost an independent financial force. The deregulation of banks and banking and investment was a major breakthrough for the capitalists. So there are now people call it casino capitalism or Ponzi scheme capitalism or whatever, but they're building on increasingly fragile scaffolding in terms of how they make money. There's a woman named Rana Farrar who wrote a book called Makers and Takers. She's not an anti-capitalist really, but she has a good critique. And she talks about how, like when I grew up in Detroit, my father worked on the assembly line. They made cars. That's how they exploited workers. And there's a whole Marxist formula for that, understanding surplus value. But at the end of the day, workers get paid a certain amount. The cars get produced and sold for a certain amount. The difference between what workers get paid and what is actually required to make the car and what the car sells for is what the capitalists would siphon off as profit, right? But the financial capitalists are making money in a different way. They're banking on debt, having people go more and more in debt in order for them to make more and more money. And they're selling formulas for making more money. How do they gamble on the future? That's what futures are. Warren Buffett talked about derivatives, which is this kind of packaged bundle of investments. It's not a car, it's not an ink pen, it's not a coffee cup, it's not a tangible commodity. It's an idea for how the money will grow, connected to tangible commodities. But they're making their own money with these formulas. So he described derivatives, these bundled assets, as weapons of mass destruction. Now, his company still invested in derivatives, but that just gives a sense of even, to your point, even the capitalists know that they are on shaky ground and on thin ice in a way. It can't, Madoff fell, he had this Ponzi scheme of making all this money and having people pay into it and so forth. And ultimately it crumbled, so that's one of the fragile pressure points, vulnerabilities of capitalism in this 21st century capitalism, as I see it. The other, of course, as you said, is climate and the environment, ecology. I like the EEE though, ecology, environment, economy. But because you can't have an infinite growth economy on a finite planet. To your point about growth and degrowth. That's why the degrowth movement is so interesting. They're like, people say if you, the little puppy, you can't give them too much food because they just keep eating and then, they'll like burst the gut or something. I don't know. But it's like the capitalists, they're insatiable. Everything is measured by more. And so this is killing them. It's killing the planet. Now, Naomi Klein has this idea of end times fascism, where she talks about they have a sense of, the religious ones have a sense of otherworldliness and transcendence. And the other ones think they're going to be in their bunkers and their fortresses, and they don't give a shit what they're doing to the planet, But I think there's some limits to that because they also want power and they want dominion over, and they can't do that totally from a bunker. And then the final thing is just tech. And part of what I think the Varoufakis book is a good one, because he talks about the ways in which, the tech billionaires are selling data, they're selling their ability to manipulate us, and they're selling surveillance technologies. And it is more connected to software than hardware, although these huge energy guzzling data centers all over the world are a tangible manifestation of all that. There was a scene where Mark Zuckerberg was in one of the congressional hearings or Senate hearings a couple of years ago, and he was talking to one of the older senators, who's also, the senator was a millionaire. He was, I forget which one it was. And of course, Zuckerberg's a billionaire. And the senator said to him something like, so how do you make money on the Facebook if you don't sell anything? And he said, well, we sell ads. but that's like an understatement. Like, they do so much more than that. But it is like the derivatives and like the financial instruments. We hear instruments, we think of something tangible, but they're actually ideas about money, formulas about money. There's an intangible component that makes them fundamentally volatile and unstable, which adds to the crisis. And it's an objective crisis.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I really appreciate this so much because I'm thinking about, the question that I always have is, well, as a Black feminist, as someone who is building power with and for Black women, girls, and gender expansive people, how do we really make it clear why this matters? And really in the everyday life. So I'm thinking about, if we have alignment, that we have a crisis of ecology, empire, and economy, we know that we will bear the brunt.
Finance, climate, and tech.
Yeah, right? We will
be less eloquent.
Right. And so I think about, for example, thinking about something like tech, and especially the digital space, where for the longest, and this is just from the data, Black women were the number one on the social platforms more than any other demographic, creating the most content. Now with artificial intelligence, that content ends up being mined. People are being duped. There's duped videos, the scamming of people, just thinking about how that impacts our community, thinking about the climate crisis, not just in the United States. Who are the communities most impacted by the climate crisis in the United States, but also globally? Even thinking about this, there's a variety of different factions. So there are people who are like, there should be zero population growth. And then there are people who are like, in particular, they seem like to be white Christian nationalists. So they're like, we need to have as many white children as possible. Yet the ability for them to have as many children as possible, the blaming of the planet and the overpopulation is on Black and brown women and their fertility, right? Even what's going on right now, it's actually been so, I mean, the fact that Tylenol is being Tylenol on trial, but while Tylenol becomes a proxy for me, that the fact is that it's going to become another way to surveil pregnancy, because all the conversation is around the behavior of women and pregnant people. Like, you are taking Tylenol, you could give your child autism. It creates this thing around, can people be trusted? Well, our pregnancies are already surveilled and criminalized, depending on who you are, particularly if you're a Black person, Black woman. But these times, right? The data, the surveillance, like you took a Tylenol, is someone going to call someone, reporting people, creating this. I just see all of the crises really impacting us. And thinking about the 300,000 Black women who were pushed out, not on accident, by design, right? Of the workforce, and the impact that has for our communities, that is millions of people who are impacted by that. It's families, it's children, it's communities. And as we continue to see the growth of this moment, right, and every day it's intensifying, I really see our community in the crosshairs in ways, in all of the ways. And it is incredibly, incredibly concerning. And Barbara, this leads me to the question that I have for you. One of the ways that I think more people are like, I see what's happening, has been the use of the National Guard deployed in majority Black cities, or cities with a large Black population, who are being run, or the mayors are Black people, in particular Black women. People are saying, wait a minute, why is the National Guard being turned on its own people? What's going on here? And so I'm really, curious for y'all, if y'all could talk about this occupation as a way of us seeing, we're in this period of interregnum, it is heightening. And my advantage is that we have literally 15 months. I don't know. That's another question for y'all. Like, how much time do y'all really think we have? Do we only have 15 months, right, to really make something happen?
Do we have 15 months?
Do we have 15 months? I have, tons of questions.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. I know, because Chicago is one of the cities, and y'all are doing some incredible organizing, resisting, resisting the desire for a takeover of the city of Chicago. I would love to get y'all's thoughts around how you see and understand policing, surveillance, the deploying of the National Guard, the policing of its people as a role in ushering in fascism. Who would like to go first? I'm really open.
You want who to go first? Me? Okay. You said so much. You said so much. So first of all, thank you for, always bringing us back to Black feminism. And, sometimes, I mean, there are silos in our intellectual language, that, you're either speaking about gender or you're speaking about this, even though and it's really the hope of Black feminism to have this holistic view of both how we understand what we're up against and how we understand what we're fighting for, right? That is always interconnected. I want to say, I'm not answering your question directly, no, but I want to just riff on what you said. The connection between patriarchy, misogyny, hetero misogyny and transphobia and this militaristic fascist moment is so important to underscore. All of these people, the right-wing organizations that are in cahoots have articulated this notion of family. And the person, Charlie Kirk, who was just killed, really celebrated, and his memorial was a celebration of the heterosexual white Christian family. There's even this spin-off notion on TikTok and social media, trad wives, these traditional wives. It's a celebration of whiteness. It's a celebration of conservative gender. And part of what they say is we want to submit to our husbands, making that a virtue again in a public discourse. That is very linked to a fascist militaristic regime that celebrates a toxic, violent masculinity as triumphant, right? That's what you need to translate to the nation, is this violent, dominating masculinity. We don't care if we hurt people. We're tough guys. As Pete Hegseth said, we want maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Is that a scary statement? We want maximum lethality. That means we want to kill people as readily, as easily, as many as we can. That's what maximum lethality means. And it rhymes with legality, which is to say we don't care about the law and let it get in. And J.D. Vance, when they bombed that boat of who knows who in the Caribbean, in Southern Caribbean, without any kind of evidence that this was drug trafficking, not that it would have been justified if it was, he said, he was challenged on social media that this was a war crime. And he said, I don't give a damn, or I don't give a shit on social media. So that level of arrogance represents a certain kind of toxic masculinity that is then politicized, weaponized in the form of the nation state advocating for a certain set of policies. And so I think we should see those related, and all of these things that are going to happen are going to adversely and disproportionately impact women, Black women, women of color, gender nonconforming folks. And what's happening with the transgender community in terms of scapegoating and violent denial of not just medical access, but just basic fundamental dignities. That is another feature of fascism, to create a scapegoat, a spectacle, a hated other in your midst, and to rally people around that, So I think we see all these features through a Black feminist lens. It helps us understand them, and hopefully gives us some sense of who we need to organize, what we need to organize, and what we need to do moving forward. I didn't answer your question.
No, but I appreciate that. One of my frustrations right now is that, and this has been a prolonged one, is that, talking about gender and asserting that having a feminist lens and strategy and feminist a part of how we win is that it's oftentimes we're excluded because it seems like, oh, we're just working on like the cute little gender issues, as if it's not literally the structure from which this is operating from. So it's not a lack of vision. There is a worldview that our opposition has. And so in many ways, it's like we have to understand that it's not just a white version of the world. I really love that you called it conservative gender. It's conservative behavior. It makes me think about this idea of the cult of true womanhood, right? That it's piety, purity, all of these things. And it's the trad wives usher this in. And then you also are seeing, especially in the time of uncertainty, a rise of religiosity, right? And the type of religiosity that we're seeing is not oftentimes the liberatory type of religiosity. It's even the fact that there's even a laughing joke that there's a rapture today. It's the type of Christianity that your behaviors are bad, it's punitive, that there's a way of knowing and ordering of the world. And so I really, really do appreciate what you shared. And I actually think it tees up M for something that I would like for you to share. Folks, get your questions in. We're getting ready to move to Q&A. I really was thinking about this question with you, M, around the role of policing and surveillance, because I really think it's helpful your framing around understanding Black people as a domestic colony and how that matters at a time like this. And so could you expound on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start actually where you and Barbara just were, which is being explicit about the role of patriarchy and the logic of patriarchy to undergird this whole situation. I'm like, what word can we call it? This whole situation. And I want to make explicit the relationship, the dialectical relationship between the economy, right? Gender, racial capitalism, and culture. So patriarchy, and I think about this a lot because a lot of my work was working with survivors of sexual violence, childhood sexual assault, intimate partner violence. And patriarchy is so insidious because it teaches and has taught folks who are survivors that what happened to you, you deserve. I mean, if you really think about the socialization of that, right? If children in this society are told, right, whether it is a particular type of religious, to be seen and not to be heard, right? You have no voice. Whatever happens to you, you be quiet about it, right? That facilitates the uncle, the cousin, the older sister, the whoever causes harm to that child and the secret is never told. If you are told as a trans person, a girl person, a woman person, etc., that you are less valuable and that your whole life needs to actually be around supporting cis men, then you are taught to endure whatever happens to you, no matter what, at whatever cost, right? And because of patriarchy, there isn't the social support to help people survive that experience, right? There isn't the state support to help people survive those experiences. What I'm trying to unearth here and evoke here is if you teach a people that they can be dominated, that they can be subjugated, and that can happen by the people who love you the most, then it is really easy to teach the same set of people that, yeah, and by the way, the National Guard is here.
Yep.
And they're going to dominate you too. Yep. Oh, and by the way, the police is coming to strip search you. They get to dominate you too, because we've taught you that body you got ain't yours, right? Or by the way, we can take away your gender affirming care. We cannot speak to you in the way that meets you. We cannot acknowledge your pronouns. We can name you however we want. We can categorize you as such. We can put you over here. We can segregate you. We can pay you less because you don't have as much value to us. And if you're taught that in your home by parents, by people around you, by siblings, in your intimate relationships, in schools, etc., that socializes a people to be ready for fascism. I'm going to say that again. If you are in a society that teaches domination, that socializes domination, that teaches you your body, your life is less valuable, then it sets you up. It primes you to be ready for a quote unquote strong man leader.
Yeah. Can I add on to that too, Em?
Yeah.
You focus on the core of it, which is, the violation and the violence, right? That to be violated, to be physically controlled, to not have bodily autonomy. The other component of that is how patriarchy teaches benevolent domination. In other words, the good father who doesn't violate anybody sexually, doesn't even have to hit anybody, but they are in charge. And they're in charge because they know better than you, because they're more powerful than you, because they are the head and there can only be one head of the family. So that kind of thinking prepares us to be, there's somebody who I might not know why they're telling me to do this, but I should do it because they know better than me, and to see, in heterosexual, unequal, sexist heterosexual families where the mother plays that role and the father. Now, our Black community has always been different, but there are patriarchal institutions that have that kind of benevolent and violent forms of patriarchy that are manifest inside Black communities, and we need to be honest about that too. The Black church, where, there's been steady resistance to women being in the pulpit, having the same kind of, authority, moral authority, voice, space for voicing interpretation of the Bible, etc. And the auxiliary and the preacher are clearly in a power, have a power differential. So anyway, all these things, are part of the larger puzzle. And I think we have to always be mindful of that.
Yep.
I wanted to just, back on my stay optimistic tip, which I have to have a mantra for every freaking day. When we're talking about the importance of feminist analysis, we're talking about oppression and domination. But I want to remind us, when you think of, say, the 5 biggest movements in this country and many of them globally, migrants and immigration, climate, even Occupy Wall Street and the Arab Spring and the emergence of Podemos and the Plaza movement in Europe, and the movement for Black Lives and anti-war movement. There has been a very strong feminist presence and leadership. Some of the people standing on the front lines getting arrested to stop the war machine have been all around the world, have been women. People advocating for climate have been feminist voices. Migration and immigration, some of the most vulnerable, some of the most vocal. In Occupy Wall Street movement in that whole period, in the movement for Black Lives and what we term the Black Lives Matter movement, feminists, particularly Black queer feminists, have emerged. That's not just coincidental. Just like, just wonder why that is. No, it is because of people's position, and it's not biological. Let's be clear about that. Race is not biological and gender is not biological. Okay? So, but it's positionality. It's who we are in the world based on who we choose to be, how we choose to express ourselves, who we love, etc. That creates the potential for certain kind of consciousness. And I also want to say potential, because every trans person is not a revolutionary. Every Black woman is not a feminist. All this kind of stuff. We know this. We're just echoing each other.
Yes, we are. It's the thing that keeps me, and I think I want to ask for some questions, and I have a final question for y'all as we start to this conversation is so juicy. The thing that gives me so much hope is the feminist movements from across the globe. And on every front of, folks that have been facing fascism and overthrowing authoritarianism, a strong feminist movement has been critical to that. And so I feel really grateful to be we have Pumi, who is from South Africa, who's on that I think all of us know, who's joining us, and just saw in the comments. But my goodness, so much love to the organizing that's happening on the continent in particular. Some of the most incredible feminist organizing happening there. So much to be learned and so much leadership. And I think it is required that we have a strong Black feminist movement here in the United States. And as Barbara was mentioning, we have to also be working with others. So, I'm hungry to build this left multiracial feminist movement so that we can actually be thinking about how can we build together, right? Because we really have to. If we are going to stop fascism, it will be because the feminist movement in the United States has played a crucial role. And that is really what I'm throwing I'm throwing my back into that. So I want to I want to have this as a final question and then see if folks have some questions. So from both of your vantage, how much time we got? I personally have been using the November midterms of 2026. Will we have fair and free elections, really, is the thing that I keep thinking about. They could happen, right? But, the redistricting is so terrible. They redraw on the maps. It won't be fair. And in particular, how can Black feminists play a crucial role in this time? I have some ideas, but I really would love to hear from y'all. Like, how much time are you think we really playing with? And what if y'all would say, get ready? And by get ready, this is what I need y'all to do, or you to consider. What would y'all say?
Well, I can go. I'm going to say this. I'm a little, this question has been asked of us many times, and I want us to resist a number. I'll tell you why. There's so many variables at play. The people who study authoritarian regimes say 12 to 18 months, but that's across many different time periods. It's across many different geographies. And there's, again, so many variables. We don't know, I hate to even, spin these scenarios. Just any kind of crises that happens shoots up the clock, expedites things, creates a possibility for them to put in place things that might take months and months if that crisis doesn't happen. We don't all have control over whether those crises occur. You can just imagine what kind of crises I'm talking about. The other thing is I don't want us to either slow down or speed up. This particular fascist movement is moving very fast. I think technology is amplifying it. The fact that they have the tech billionaires in their back pocket doesn't help us, but it is moving very, very fast. Surveillance has a capacity that it has not had in any other movement against fascism that I know of. The level of surveillance on all levels. People are on a signal thinking, we're in a secret little closet and can whisper anything we want, but there is extensive surveillance at all levels, and with the increasing attacks on media and lack of reporting and disclosure and the erasure of, documents that people have the right to access to, we really don't know the level of surveillance that's going on or what's coming. So I don't want us to say we have, 15 months or we have, this amount of month, and then stuff happens in 3 or 6 months. I think we are up against the clock. That's the most important thing. I think there are critical, pivotal moments that are going to be lightning rods, whether, whatever happens or doesn't happen. And I agree with you 100%. The midterms are one of those moments. The midterms are not going to be a liberation moment. The midterms will determine, can we slow this fascist train and possibly eventually derail it? But can we slow it? And that will be one thing. But we have to be, the left, sometimes we want one strategy that's going to win. And people say, I say this all the time. People say, when we fight, we win. We don't always win when we fight. Let's be honest, like Cabral said. But if we fight and we fight hard and we fight smart, we move the needle on freedom. So moving the needle, what is winning? It's not an absolute. So that's my aim for that. Historically, we studied change over time. So it's always like there's people have huge fights about periodization. Like, even when did the mid-century Black freedom movement start and when did it stop? When do you name the beginning? Do you name it at Brown v. Board? Do you name it at, the period of the New Deal? When do you name the beginning? When do you name the end? All of that and it's all a little bit fraught and fuzzy. So I think we don't have a lot of time before it's consolidated. There's work to do even if it becomes consolidated. But if we work as hard as we can, as smart as we can, as honestly and egoless as we can, that we can have an impact. It is our strength that they are responding to, and we need to tap it.
Thank you, Barbara. What's your thinking around the time? Do you have, a suggestion or idea around that? And what should we be doing right now?
I agree with the comments Barbara just named, which is there are so many variables. It's hard to say what time specifically. And there are going to be these key moments that could accelerate or decelerate their advancements. And the most significant, what I wish was the most significant of the variables, was our resistance. And so that is what I focus my time on. So we have to be, there's no, there's no invisible army that's going to come in and fix this for us. It's us, right? And I think about this a lot, about comrades and family members and friends who I know I've heard them say, oh, if I lived back then, I would have did this. Well, here's your chance. You're in it. You're in it. It's time for everybody to become a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger or whatever. So what I will say about what is to be done is there are a couple of things. One, people have to be active. This, if the most honest thing maybe I can say to you is, you're going to be in a sprint for the next year and a half. This is not a time where you can be like, I'm just going to lay back. Laying back allows them to accelerate full pedal, to the ground. We collectively have to understand that this is a sprint time. But what is that sprint? We have to talk to more people than we've ever talked to. If you don't have a relationship with your neighbor, you need to build one.
That's right.
Because your defense is not going to be abstract. It's going to be the person next door that knows you, knows your name. If you have kids, pet, understands your patterns, can help you be like, yeah, that car looks weird right there. I'm going to keep an eye on it, right? So it's actually talking to the people around you. It's really being part of a community, not just online, but in person, physically, where you are. It's being involved in an organization. The kind of power we need to build cannot be done by individuals alone. It's going to require a shared and collective strategy that we have some alignment and agreement to collectively execute and be accountable to one another in. So folks have to be active in organizations. This is not a time of just clicking the signature and yeah, I gave, and that's cool. But we actually need more activity than that, right? We need people really signing up to do that canvassing, make those phone calls, attending those community meetings, being involved, voicing your ideas, and learning. And learning. We all need to sharpen. And our enemy is able to take advantage of this moment because they have people over there who study. You have to study on our side so that we can make sense of this moment and take advantage of this moment. The other thing that I'll say is, do not go underground. Our movement needs to remain above ground. It needs to be above ground so we can continue to recruit people. We can continue to counter their narratives and their ideas about what they think should be happening in the world, and instead to project a Black feminist vision about a Black feminist politic to help people find their ways in the dark, right? When the sun's going down, ain't the time to turn off the lights. It's when you turn them on, and when it's real dark, you turn them up the highest so people can find you, right? We have to have people find us. Our organizations are above, or our above the ground organizations is what helps facilitate that. And so as scary as it is, you have to resist the sort of, collapsing onto yourself or retrenching. This is not a time to retrench. This is a time for us to find one another, to be together with one another, and to take collective action with one another. This is our moment. I do believe this moment is going to be spoken about in history books to come. And the question for all of us as freedom fighters is, what will be said about us?
Absolutely. Where were you? That's the question. Where were you?
Those people who are like, I marched with King and we saw the pictures. You wasn't there. Like, we saw you wasn't there, And
yeah.
so it's to be protagonist, is to take action.
It's not as sexy as I think a lot of people would like, which is, and you say this often, how am I supposed to believe if you won't go to a community meeting that you're going to start breaking people out of jail all of a sudden? How are you going to go from that to that, right? If I can't get you just to come to your community meeting or just to know your neighbors. So yes, these are the times. If you were waiting for it, Black Feminist Future is a great organization for you to be able to join. And I am going to share with you, I believe right now, and there's a question in this, and I will ask, that community building is going to be so key. I call it, we need to be building Black feminist community. It is, who is your crew? And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be rolling out, inviting our members to host good old fashioned house parties. Invite 5 people together in your home, and let's talk about what are we going to do to be in community together. And then those people invite 5 more. That it really is the mathematics of being together, right? The mathematics of community, that it does multiply. And though it can seem like it's so simple, it is an incredible antidote and a powerful tool. And I really do encourage folks. It's like, well, what should I do? And I think, some folks may leave the country. That's an option. Some of us opt not to. I won't be. My mama's here, my people's here, and I got to make sure that they make it out. But I think also the way that we make it out, we are going to be making some decisions that may not seem radical or Black feminist. In particular, we talked about the elections. And Barbara, you landed, you said, listen, this is not going to be our freedom election, right? Like when we talk about 26 in the midterms, now, I mean, what election ever is going to be like that? Let's be honest. Like let's be really clear about it. But I really want us as Black feminists to be in real principled conversation and struggle about the strategies that we are going to be employing, and not us be deceived that some of the strategies or tactics that we like, well, that's not the most radical. It may not be, but it can get us to fight another day. Yeah. And I know that there is something around, oh my gosh, it's coming up for me. It's the It's the
non-compliance?
No, not non-compliance, but it's when you try to it's a demand that it's a non-something. It's like the same non-reformist reforms, right? And it's like,
yeah.
It's interesting. But I also want to say this. What kind of radical should we be aiming for? I think the level of radical that we should be aiming for, it will require lots of tactics. And what you do inside of a community organization may not be the same that you may be doing in this organization. It may take the shapes of many forms. But I think at the most basic is let's build community. There's other tactics that we can move to. We should have demands. We should make asks. But I think that's going to be key. Barbara, and then I'm going to see if we have any other questions, and I'm going to close us out for this incredible home.
Was that a question?
No, I just was saying.
And she says that she gives this beautiful speech, and then she says, "Barbara."
And I'm like, do you want to add? If there's anything that y'all want to say,
always say something else. I mean, I agree with what you said. I think we need to be principled, but not purists. And elections fit into that. And elections have never been. They are essential and inadequate, but they are important in this moment, as are many other things that we need to do. The thing I love the most about what you said, and we don't have the luxury to, I can't vote because they don't agree with, I mean, people we love don't agree with us on everything. So, and okay, I'll be the first to say this too. There is no contradiction between saying the Democratic Party is corrupt and still participating in the elections, right? For a whole number of reasons. People say lesser of two evils, as if we do want less evil in the world. And if it puts us in a better position, not because of, only because of their organizing strategy, because of their approach to domination, is going to give us more maneuverability, not because they want us to have maneuverability, because that's built in. But, I want to go back to what you said about kind of self-organization and what Em said about the importance of joining organizations. Individualism, and ironically, this right-wing movement has managed to get people into organized formation, right? Speaking of Beyonce, getting people in formation, getting people into organized formation at the same time that they champion, individualism. Everybody should do what they want, regardless of, don't have regulations, don't limit this or limit that. But we do have a problem with individualism, where we think we can't unite with people if they don't agree with us on every single thing. We have to do our own thing. It's a contradiction, and it's an oxymoron, which is a contradiction in terms. If you say you are an independent revolutionary or independent freedom fighter. No, freedom fighters and revolutionaries are connected to other people. They're not just floating out there in space, being right. So I would say I've argued for this notion of freedom circles, which can be, like you said, house parties, this, that, or the other, but to encourage people to self-organize and then to try to link those self-organized units. Everybody's not going to have a house party. I have friends that are, in their 60s and 70s, and, maybe they'll have a card game and talk about what's happening in this moment. Maybe they will have, a pizza party and talk about what is happening. Maybe they'll get people together at their kids' school, at their workout class, at their church or mosque, at the, in the apartment building they live in, whatever. We are in community, and we don't take advantage of being in those communities. I mean, on my elevator, neighbors have said to me, what do you think about what, I say to them, what do you think about what's happening? Did you read the newspaper today? And that opens up possibilities for conversations. And it might not be, it might not be the person you would choose to hang out with the most, but we have to also be more open, more willing, more, connected to people in all kinds of ways. And as you said, that's really the ultimate security. Anyway, I'm repeating what you all have said.
Did you want to add anything before I close us out on this Tuesday?
Yeah, both on the thread that you and Barbara started, but also this question of, I thought somebody said, what type of radical should we be aiming for? So I want to speak to a second about the role of revolutionaries. So revolutionaries are people who think the society should be fundamentally different than the way that it is. Fundamentally different than the way that it is. And so based on that, I'm going to make some assumption that I'm on a call right now with people who are revolutionary, people who believe that the world should be fundamentally different than the way that it is and willing to take action toward that belief. What makes you a revolutionary isn't necessarily the tactic you take. It is the strategy, it is the community, it is the force that you can build toward getting us closer to the world that we all need. I say that because there's a difference between a revolutionary and, as Barbara said, an independent, right? There's a difference between a revolutionary and, let's call it out, an activist, right? There's nothing wrong per se with having your own set of actions you're going to take because you're not connected yet, but that cannot be your final way, that your most complete and final way that you interact in this particular moment. And so I think right now, the challenge that revolutionaries actually have is to bring more people into our work and more people into our movement. So the question is, what actions do we need to take to do that? Great. I have my own particular ideas. I could go out by myself and have a one-person march. What is that? Right? Like what did I achieve? What did I do? If I can get 10 people engaged in the work and committed to do something in the work by having a conversation at a potluck, then to me, the scientific assessment is, as a revolutionary, I should attend the potluck. Now, I think all forms of resistance and tactics are going to be needed in our course or in our struggle. So this is not me saying that one thing is inherently better than the other. What I am trying to agitate here is the clarity around the objective and doing what needs to be done to meet the objective. And right now, there have been many of us who've been really good at agitation and not building, which has led to isolation. We're not going to win this through isolation. So you're going to have to talk to somebody you don't like, is where I'm going with this. You're going to have to talk to somebody who probably should talk to you before, or who dissed your post, or who blocked you, whatever. We're going to have to develop that kind of emotional maturity in this moment to help build the community, because our task is to bring more people into the work. Our objective right now as revolutionaries is to bring more people into the work. We do not have critical mass in our work at this moment. We need to bring more people in. And so that's what we should be thinking about. So when the question is like, what is what is the radical that we should be aiming for, I have the same politics no matter where I go or no matter who I engage with. My politics don't change. What I do have is the sophistication and the strategy to know how to engage with people who are in various paths or various places on the arc of my politic. So the way that I spoke to my grandmother about trans liberation may be a different language than in which I spoke at this call today, or if I'm in a group, talking to a bunch of radicals who studied a lot. But my politics and my values are still the same. So you should never yield that. I'm never going to be okay with genocide. That is not the question that we're putting before you. What we're saying to folks tonight is to keep those values and those politics centered, but be willing to engage people so you can change their heart and mind. Because we need to bring people into our work. That is actually our task. And then I'll close by evoking Maya Angelou, who, and I know why the cage bird sings, I'm paraphrasing her, but she says something to the effect that my grandmother told me to tolerate people who were illiterate, but not people who were uneducated. And what she meant by that is if somebody has not had a chance to learn already, or who have not received the education that you have, right? Who has not had maybe a mentor or organization, all the things that we get that help develop us, that we need to be patient in those conversations and be willing to educate, agitate, and bring people along. That is totally different than someone who has had education, who is refusing it, or someone who is intending your demise. We have to be able to see the difference and be willing to build with folks who have not had the opportunity to learn the way that we've been learning.
Thank you so much. I think that's such a powerful way to close our evening. First, I want to give thanks to both Barbara Ransby and M. Adams for joining us for our third quarter of Hone. It was bars. I have so many notes, and I really am hoping that I have a lot of ideas. Oh, Pumi, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, thank you all of you, but it's always so great to see comrades that are joining us from far away. Here's some of the steps that I want to leave y'all with. Sam was dropping them already. Become a member of BFF. There is going to be an additional, for members only, political education to go deeper around what we learned today. Really excited around that for our members. Secondly, members, we're going to get ready to roll out our whole hosting these house parties. And so look out in the email for that. And they should be joy-filled. I can't wait to host mine. I can't wait for that. Both M and Barbara listed some books that, references, named people. Some of them got dropped here in this call. I really, really want to make sure that we're going to send that out in the email. And if M and Barbara have additional resources, including their own writings that they think could be helpful, and also things to listen to. I'm on the go and moving or driving, and I'm like, I could totally listen to this. So please make sure that you send us your resources and we can send them out. You can also just drop them here. I am left thinking about this question right now. So many questions, but where were you is the question that's really thinking to me right now. We don't know. We have 15 months or 6 years or infinity. We don't know that. We are getting clear around being able to really clearly name the moment, what's at stake, and what the impact will be for our community. That's some of the things that we do know. And every single day there's something else. And all of us said tonight that an antidote is to fight the isolation, the individualism, the overload of information is by building community. That's one of the first steps that you can take. And so we really invite you to do that. That you can start to think of Black Feminist Future as a lighthouse, as some place that's really trying to chart the way and provide direction and build community together. We ain't perfect, and that's not the point, but we are trying to build Black feminist community. I am left feeling more buoyed, more hopeful, more equilibrium because of this conversation. And I'm really, really just so thankful to you, Barbara, and you, M, who are both personal lighthouses for me, who continue to tell me to keep going, that remind me that I have work to do, and that knowing that together we're collectively building bright Black feminist futures. So I want to thank you both. Thank you, community, for being with us today. And we look forward to you for Q4 home that'll be coming up, in Q4, which starts in October, most likely in November. Thank you and gratitude. Take care.
Bye.